Hey there, geographers. If you're watching this video right now, that means maybe you were here for the live, but most likely you probably weren't. So this is the part of the live stream where we're going to go over the Unit 2 notes, population and migration and patterns and processes. The rest of the live stream's been cut out to keep this a little bit shorter, but hey, check out our live stream tomorrow or the next day at 7 p.m. We'd love to see you there. So without further ado, let's go into Unit 2, population, migration, patterns, and processes. Woo! Gosh, it's gonna be an exciting one. So to start off, we need to talk about population distribution. So remember, distribution is different than population density. That's gonna be important to remember. Distribution is how people are spread out across a specific area. Density is gonna be how many people are located in a particular area. And there's a bunch of different reasons why people are gonna live in different places. So, in class, we probably talked about different environmental factors, economic, political, social. All of those are things that can change where people live. The climate, the landforms, bodies of water, the culture, the economy, all of these have an influence. And so that is important to understand. Generally, we can see some themes. Remember, we have site and situation. And real quick in our chat, let me know what is the difference between site and situation, and I'll pin your comment on the screen. So, site and situation, what's the difference? Because those do impact what's happening there. So, again, when we're looking at stuff, a lot of major cities are often by bodies of water and especially oceans and rivers that connect outwards. And that allows for more trade, which helps the economy and grows commerce and makes travel easy. All right. What do we got for site and situation? Site is physical attributes of a place. Exactly. Yep. Site is the exact location. Situation is relative. So connecting to some concepts from yesterday, when we're looking at absolute location, relative location, that would be there. Site shows the physical area. That would definitely work. Situation, that's surrounding features. Yes. Excellent. Cool. Yeah. So hopefully that helps with site and situation. Those concepts will also come up throughout everything as well. Let's see. A couple people are saying the audio is a little scratchy. Can try to figure out. Hmm, unmute. Okay. I'll try to mess with it as we go through stuff. So I apologize if there's some audio. Maybe I'm having a little bit of lag or something. I'm not sure there. We'll figure that out. So, all right. Next, though, is population density. So, in your guided notes, again, those guide notes are in the ultimate review packet. You can follow along with them. They'll definitely help on making sure you're getting these key concepts. But population density is how many people are in a particular area. There's different densities you need to be familiar with. The first is arithmetic, which essentially is population density. The formula for that, we're taking our total population, you're gonna divide by that total land area. It's gonna show, are people, gonna be packed in an area, or maybe there's more space, there's more room, people are spread out. Physiological density is gonna be our next density, and that is gonna be our total population divided by arable land. That's gonna be important. This is gonna show us how much food we need to feed our population. The higher this number is, and remember, the higher the number, the more stress that's gonna be put on that land, because we're gonna have to feed more and more people. So, if it's a really high number, it's gonna be harder us to feed all those individuals. Maybe we have to rely on trade or import, export, all those different things. The last density you wanna be familiar with is the agricultural density. The agricultural density, remember, is the amount of farmers divided by arable land. And generally, this is gonna show us about how efficient we are as a society. If this is a low number, that means we don't need a lot of people working our farm to produce food for our people. So that could show maybe we're more efficient, maybe we have better means of production there, maybe we have better technology, we're using more combines, we're using now drones and GPS, some of our geospatial technologies that could all impact there. A big thing too to put, if our agricultural density is lower, that means more people can do other jobs. And so we might see people in other areas. Generally speaking, that also shows more economic development as well. So, that's important to kind of understand. As we progress from that primary sector to the secondary, to the tertiary, to the quaternary, so forth down, which we'll talk about those in Unit 7. So if you're like, "Whoa, what are these?" We're moving out of those agricultural jobs into more industrial and eventually more service jobs. So we'll get more into that later on, but all these units kind of connect, and that's the cool thing about AP geography. Hopefully that helps a little bit with the densities. If you do have questions on them, if you go into the ultimate review packet, I do have a types of density quiz, and there's like a 30-minute video of me breaking it down and like going over it so that you can see a little screenshot there of the data and then explaining like the different densities, how they connect, the impact on the land. What does that say about society? So it is a great resource. Again, if you need some more practice, there's a bonus quiz in there for you. All right, next one is carrying capacity, and you can see also these consequences now. So I have a couple different pictures up that I want you to kind of look at. We got our political, we have social, we have a variety of things that happen. Now, when we're just talking about carrying capacity, remember we are just looking at essentially that maximum number of individuals that the environment can sustain. And if we exceed this, we start to do damage to our environment. We could lose different aspects of it. Now, the other part of this is those consequences, and you can see these pictures here. Depending on our population distribution or our density, that changes different aspects. If we have an urban area with a really high population density, we might have more traffic that could lead to more stress in individuals' lives. But we also then might have more people. We will if we have a high density, but we'd have more opportunities for those individuals. So there could be more social opportunities, more nightlife, more economic opportunities, more companies might want to work there. If we're in a more dispersed population, so an area that's more spread out, maybe we have a lower density there. We might have more green spaces, which is a big positive. We also might have to travel farther for different resources or even services. We also might lack some of those as well. And so it's important to understand how our density and distribution can impact the way of life that people have in these different areas. And these themes will kind of come up throughout the whole course. So I just wanted to highlight, realize too, when we say consequences, that means there is positives and negatives. It's not all just a negative thing. A lot of times people think consequences, oh, it has to be negative. No, there's positive consequences. All right, the next one I'm going to put up on the screen, it's the sex ratios. We're going to start getting into some population composition. With these, the sex ratio, you can see number of males per 100 females in a population. And understanding the sex ratio can help you kind of see what's going on in a society. So if our answer for that sex ratio is ever under 100, that would mean there are fewer males than females. If it's over, there's more males than females. And if it's ever 100, it means it's the exact same. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting we can see is how societies generally age, the sex ratio actually becomes more imbalanced. We actually start to see that there are going to be more women than men. Anyone know why? Let's see. Put in the chat. Why might that happen? And I am super far behind in the chat. Okay, I'm just gonna have to hit. I will go back and look at a lot of your comments. So I appreciate all of the comments. Man, a lot of people got the Titan situation. I'm still on that part. Okay, we're going up. War, men die earlier. That is true. Educational opportunities. That could be. Yeah. So generally, men oftentimes don't live as long. And so that can lead to then our population kind of composition changing and that sex ratio becoming imbalanced, whether it be war or whether it be different life decisions. In general, women live longer than men. So it's skewed over time. All right, the next one I'm going to leave on the screen too is our dependency ratios. So I'll make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. This is that ratio of people who are not working or they're not part of that active labor force. They're not actively working. The amount of people we're having to support. And the larger this ratio is, the greater the burden there is on the working population. And we can break this ratio down in a couple different ways, and it actually gives us different insight into a society. So if we're looking at the elderly dependency ratio or the age dependency ratio, that is on the bottom here, right here. This is again looking at those people who are 65 and up. Generally, they're gonna be retired, and so they're not working anymore. Oftentimes, they're making less, which might mean they're spending less. If they're spending less, they're working less, they're not paying as much in taxes. That is going to then decrease the amount of tax revenue coming in for the government, which means they can't provide as many services. Also, a society that has a really high age dependency ratio or a very high elderly dependency ratio is going to have more burdens of like Social Security, healthcare, retirement homes, all of that puts a great strain on spending on the government. Even families can, if we look at some social changes, they might have to have some of their parents move in with them. They can't afford some of these different homes or retirement homes, or maybe they also don't have that preference. They would like to stay as a family unit, and that is great. But that does change then some of their livelihood. So that would be some things that could happen with a higher elderly dependency ratio. The child dependency ratio, on the other hand, again, is focusing on the people 0 to 14. These are people who generally are not working because they're too young. If we have a really high child dependency ratio, that's going to be a sign for society. We need more schools. Maybe we need more daycare. Our population is growing. We need to be building more parks and services. So, depending on which one of these is higher or lower, it can give us insight into what might be happening in a society. And again, the total dependency ratio is actually going to take the people who are too young to work, the too old to work, put them together. We divide by the people who are working times by 100. So it's just going to look overall the amount of dependence that we have. Cool. All right, take a second. I just went over a bunch of stuff. What do we got? Aging societies. How do you think that will change the priorities of a society? So our population composition, people are getting old, things are changing. What's going to happen? What could be some problems there? Right. A couple people saying the audio. Let me quick try one thing. As people are quick, putting, how would this change? Test, testing, testing. Okay. I tried unplugging it and resetting the mic. Hopefully, this. Oh, I can. Let's shut that down. Okay. Hopefully this is getting better. I'll try to look at this later on. All right. So a couple things. People are saying need for more healthcare. That would definitely be stuff that could come up. Support for the elderly. That would be something that would happen. The Kahoot is going to happen probably in like 20-ish minutes or so, hopefully, maybe a little more. Dependency increases, less children, more hospitals, higher taxes. This is something to actually think about. Great point here. If we are seeing a change in our dependency ratios, less people are working, more people are out of work, that's going to mean that that working population has to cover more of those bills. And so generally taxes might start to go up. You might have to retire later in life. And we're seeing that in countries today around the world. As they age, they're having some hard decisions of trying to figure out how do we support our population, but also pay for everything. All right, what we're going to do next now is go into some population pyramids. I got one here for you. This is Italy. Population pyramids you definitely want to be familiar with. These are going to be important. Okay, so when we're looking at it here, a couple things I want to point out is we can actually see some cohorts here. And different parts of this pyramid will give us insight. One, remember, here we have our ages. And at the bottom here, we're looking at our population. So here we have males, here we have females. As we extend outward, in this one, it's in the millions. Sometimes it's the percents. So just be on the lookout for that. That can change maybe the shape of it a little bit. One thing to note, and I always tell my students this, when you're looking at a population pyramid, remember it's like someone just took a picture. I guess for you guys, maybe it's like someone took a picture. They took it with their phone, not like the old school camera there. But they took a picture of society. It's a snapshot in time. So in this case here, when we're looking at it, it's mirrored. I don't know, whichever way it's pointing. In this case for Italy, at 2018, these are the different people. If we were to fast forward a year, we would be taking these people who are in the 0 to 4. As we start seeing they're going to move up, or every 5 years. So if we're looking into the future, what's going to happen in 25 years? Well, this bar is going to be up here. So we can kind of see, are we growing? Are we shrinking? So something to kind of think about there. So on the bottom here, we have our pre-reproductive years. Generally, these are people who are too young to have children. As this side, if this is bigger, that's going to mean we are growing as a population. Oftentimes, we'll connect to that demographic transition model. This would mean that generally we're maybe in more stage 2 if this base is really big. Obviously, here it's not. This would not be stage 2. Then we have our reproductive years. So this is that 15 to about 44, 45 years. Generally, this is where people are going to have children, where you start having children, where people are able to do that. After that, then we have our post-reproductive years. Generally here, people can no longer have children. So important to kind of understand the differences here. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is because by understanding the population pyramid and by understanding these different groups, it gives us insight. If we have a lot of people in their pre-reproductive years, we know we're growing. If a lot of people are in that post-reproductive, they're not going to be having children. Our population is going to be shrinking. And if a lot of people are in those reproductive years, they still have the ability to have children. That's also too what I want to point out is those reproductive years are also, and a little bit of the post, generally when people are working. So if that middle is really big, we have a big workforce. And all this gives us different insight into social factors, into economics, into politics. And so not only for the current day, but in the future too. If I have a big base, I know that in the future, I'm going to have more workers. In this case for Italy, if we quick go back here and look at it, notice our base is really small. 10 years, 20 years in the future, Italy's losing their workforce. They're going to have less men, less women. So all these jobs that might be covered right now are eventually going to need to have some workers, and they're going to have a shortage of workers. And so that's things that countries right now are trying to deal with. How do we plan for the future? Well, to start, we look at geographic data and populations. So this course, that's the cool thing. It's very relevant to the world we live in. All right. So for time, we're not going to go over all these. I just have some questions for you to kind of think about. So here we have a population pyramid. One thing I want to notice on the bottom here, we're looking at percentages. So now, like I mentioned, our last one was in the millions. Here's percent. So we're looking at our percent of the population. So it's important whenever we get a stimulus component on our AP test, always read and look at what are we looking at so we don't make some easy mistakes. So one of the things to note here, I got some people already in the chat saying, quick going down. People are saying stage two. Yes. Agriculture. We would have more agriculture. Yes, agriculture generally in those stage 2 countries. So right now we're looking at some generalizations here. But as it's more expansive there, some of the things they might need to provide too is going to be childcare, schools. In the future, they're going to see this growth continue to happen. So those are all aspects of this population pyramid. Here we have Germany. A different story definitely is being shown here. Very different. Couple different things we can start to see. Some people are asking about the demographic transition model and the stages. We are going to go into it. So we're going to talk about it. So don't worry there. Stage one people are saying stage 1. There's no countries in stage 1. So yeah. All right. So for Germany, jobs that are going to be prevalent, notice that this shows more economic development, connecting into our Unit 7 and some of our other stuff. I know that as more economic development happens, generally we see more tertiary jobs appear, those service sectors, quinary and quaternary. We have CEOs, we have business leaders, we have presidents, congressmen, all these different things. But we have less people in that primary sector, which is going to be agriculture, or the primary sector is things that are using natural resources. Secondary is going to be manufacturing. So those stage 2, stage 3 countries have a lot of that. Here we can see now, though, it's different. Another thing, too, to point out, Germany is probably going to be actually decreasing. Notice the majority of our population is starting to be in these upper parts. They no longer can have children. And so what's going to happen? Well, in the future, they're going to probably continue to decrease. So it's going to be definitely stage 4, stage 5 of that demographic transition model. For services, we're going to need more retirement facilities, more social security stuff, more elderly, I was going to say elderly dependency ratio, but in general, just more services for them. And that also might deter some of our younger generations because they might not want that. That's going to put a bigger burden on those kind of cultures there. All right. Next thing, if you need more help with these, because I went through this really quick and it's really important. Again, in this ultimate review packet, I've got a video that breaks down, it's 8 minutes. It goes through a bunch of the kind of tips and tricks. So I look at different population pyramids and kind of point things out to look for. There's also a quiz on the population pyramids that goes over, I think it's 10 or 15 questions, but I go over a bunch of examples. And then again, there's a 50-minute video if you want. You don't have to watch it, but it's me taking a quiz, and you can see the screenshot there. I'm breaking down the population pyramid and explaining why each of the answers is right and not, and showing different things to look out for. So if you're interested, by all means, check it out. It's another way to practice. All right. Woo! A couple things here. Population dynamics. All of these you want to be familiar with. You got to be familiar with these. You're going to see these on the test. One way, shape, or form, it's going to be on the AP test. Crude birth rate, death rate, our natural rate of increase, or NIR, natural increase rate, total fertility rate, infant mortality, doubling time. These are common words used. And you also might see it as CBR, CDR, RNI, TFR, IMR. A lot of little short abbreviations there. So just remember that crude birth rate is births, the crude death rate is deaths, that rate of natural increase rate, one thing to look out for, remember, it's not factoring in migration. That's not part of it. It is just looking at our CBR minus our CDR. And that total fertility rate is the average number of children women will have in their reproductive years. One thing to note, in past FRQs, they have asked students to define or to talk about the total fertility rate. And one of the things that some students messed up on is they just said it was the birth rate. You would not get the point for that. You have to be able to explain it's the average number of children will have in their reproductive years. You're connecting into that. It is different than the birth rate. So I just want to point that out. I think, I don't know, was it last year? I've read through so many FRQs. This is the 2022 one or the 2023, I think. One of the FRQs had about total fertility. I might have to go back and check. But some students did lose a point because they defined it as the incorrect term. And infant mortality, remember, is infant deaths under 1 year of age for every 1,000 births there. So doubling time too, if you blank on some of these questions, you can actually see a couple things in the terms. Like doubling time, doubling is talking about going from like 2 to 4. We're doubling in time, the amount of time it takes. Well, I could connect in the population. How long does it take to expand there? So hopefully that helps you out with those terms. These are very common. You're going to see them a lot. All right. Let's talk about this demographic transition model. Honestly, it is definitely one of the biggest things in this unit. So this is one of the things I definitely would recommend you focusing on here. All right. Okay. All right. So stage one of the demographic transition model. So when we're looking at this, stage one thing to note, there are no countries in stage one. So one thing we can see right away, our births are high, our deaths are high. They're essentially canceling out. People are dying to anything here, pretty much everything, really. So these are canceling. Our population isn't changing much. It's relatively stable. It's kind of close to that ZPG, zero population growth, or it's just very slowly increasing. You can see an example of like a population pyramid on the screen right now too. But again, there's no countries anymore in stage two. Because of the Industrial Revolution and also the medical revolution, everyone's moved into stage two. So here we are seeing this population boom. People aren't realizing that everyone's living. So people are still having really large families because they're unfortunately expecting some of their kids not to make it. And so what's happening here is because now we have the Industrial Revolution and new technologies and the standard of living is increasing and the medical revolution, and all of a sudden now people aren't dying, which is all great. These families of 6, 7, and 8, they're not losing anyone. Positive. They're continuing to grow. But this is where we have this population boom. And a big thing here, too, this is also Malthus. We'll talk about him later. This is when he was around, and he predicted this Malthusian catastrophe was going to occur. Well, someone in the chat, I did see they were asking about a couple things with the stuff of agriculture and development. Stage one definitely is going to be more of a kind of nomadic almost, but stage 1 and 2, a lot of primary sector, a lot of focus on agriculture. As we get to stage 3, we start to see that secondary sector take off. Manufacturing starts to happen. Urbanization starts in stage 2 as well and continues into 3. We also too see as we go through these stages, women gain more and more roles in society. And we see culture start to shift. And we'll talk about culture more in unit 3. But those opportunities for women really allow women to have more of a role in society, which also brings down our birth rate. So stage 3 is where we do start to see women are gaining more roles, urbanization's happened, more manufacturing is occurring. We're starting to see that tertiary, these service jobs take off. And people are also realizing, hey, my kids are living. This is great, but I'm going to stop having as many kids. And also when we're living in a city, there's just less room. When we start moving away from the farm and we don't need as many of our family members to help out on the farm, they start going over. Now we start to see that family size decrease. In case you didn't know, children, they're expensive. And so it's harder to have more and more kids. So we start to see that birth rate finally come down. So here we really have our birth rate is declining, our death rate's declining, that growth rate is moderate. Then we get to stage 4 where finally our births are low, our deaths are low, and we're at kind of ZPG, zero population growth. Here we have a more advanced economy. A lot of jobs are in that tertiary sector. Here people actually might be moving from urban areas to suburban areas. So some counter urbanization, if we connect to unit 6, may be occurring here. Whereas before those stage 2 countries, actually we have a lot of international migration. They're actually going to be moving to stage 4 and stage 5 or even stage 3 countries because they're looking for opportunities in the economy, or they're going to be moving into urban areas. So those are some of the things to kind of think about there when we're looking at migration. Lastly, we have stage 5. And stage 5 here, it's actually going negative. Our births are so low that our deaths are actually a little higher. And so we see our population start to shrink. And so now this would be for a population pyramid. That top of the pyramid is really, really big. So hopefully that helps out. Some people are saying slow down. Some people are asking for more detail. I'm still trying to figure out the whole pacing here. We're going through an entire unit in a very little amount of time. And it's already been 30 minutes. So I do want to value your guys' time. So again, if you are following along on the guided notes, you can always pause it. Or if you don't want to pause it in the live, I will post this later on as well. But hopefully that made sense in the demographic transition model. Definitely understand this model. If you can't tell for how fast I was talking and how many things I connected to, I connected to unit 7, I connected to unit 6, I connected to unit 5, I connected a little bit into unit 4, not as much, unit 2 and unit 3. This model is massive and it connects to so many different concepts. And we kind of see it reappear. A lot of these themes repeat. It's the cool thing of this course. It all connects into our real world. Woo! All right. Other part of this is the epidemiologic transition model. So this is the next kind of model. And this actually complements that demographic transition model. Here we are looking actually, though, at different things of death. So here we're looking at where people are dying. So stage 1, pestilence, famine, death, connects into that stage 1, that demographic transition model. People are dying from practically anything. As we advance and as we continue to see, this is, and some people are asking, I can make this full screen for you so it's easier to read there. So here we're starting to see this, a decrease in these diseases. Again, we're having that medical revolution, the industrial revolution. All of this stuff is continuing to improve our life expectancy, which is helping bring these things down. Now, eventually, stage 3 we get to is degenerative diseases. And degenerative diseases are things, essentially your body as it's getting older. And this is a little bit of a spoiler in case you didn't know. I apologize to wreck anyone's day here. But we all die. So spoiler alert on that. And as you get older, different parts don't work as well anymore. And you start to age. And that would be eventually you have degenerative diseases, heart attacks, cancer, strokes. I think on my notes, I have live disease. I think I meant liver disease. I don't know what a live disease is. That's a typo. Oh, well, it's live. What do you do? All right. Anyways, moving on. This is where these diseases start to happen. Stage 4 is where we're able to actually start to fight these diseases. So we're able to start countering it. Individuals here too, because of how advanced our society is, start to change some of their habits. They might start eating healthier, exercising more. There's a lot more focus on these different lifestyle changes to try and improve your life expectancy. So here we're actually able to delay those degenerative diseases. And these first stages complement that demographic transition model really well. The 5th stage is a little bit different. So there's a couple different causes for this. The evolution of diseases, for example, if we see all of a sudden a resistance to antibiotics, like in my class, we talked about superbugs. You don't necessarily need to study them. But what would happen if all of a sudden penicillin is no longer effective? How is that going to happen? If it does, what is that going to do to things? Increased poverty rates, urbanization. Generally, that's because we have high density areas. And if we have high areas of a concentration of poverty, people unfortunately can't afford medication, or you're more likely to only take some of your antibiotics, not all of them. And then what we'll see is that diseases and stuff will evolve and mutate because you're not fully killing everything off. And globalization, which we saw with COVID-19. The world today is connected more than ever before. And that is great. It's a lot of economic development and cultures and diffusion, but it also leads to the spread of diseases. And so we can see some pandemics and things of that happening. All right. Up next is Malthus. Here we go. Malthus, he is again that stage 2 industrial revolution. The big thing to remember with Malthus is that Malthusian catastrophe, which you can see on the screen here. What he thought is our population is going to be, our growth is exponential. And you can see that here. It's going up, up, and up. Essentially, this doubling time, it just continues our population to double. While our food production is arithmetic, it is going to continue on this linear path. And Malthus was concerned that eventually we are going to have this point where our population exceeds our food production. And we're going to have a lot of issues then with society. And so people are going to panic. Now, there's a variety of critics to Malthus. At the time, actually, a lot of people were very pro large family. So at the time, he was kind of not really the most liked guy. And later in Unit 5, when we're talking about agriculture, we know we have the different agricultural revolutions, that green revolution. Eventually, we start to see that we can produce more food. Today, we're producing food without even soil with vertical farming. We have a ton of innovation happening, and that food production is not arithmetic. We also know, too, as societies develop economically, let me know in the chat so we can get some integration here. But when societies produce economically, oh my gosh, I need to slow down. I'm talking so much, so many things going. As we advance economically, what happens to our population? What's going to happen there? So let me know. What do we got? All right. Going on to our next thing as we're waiting here. So if you're looking for these two terms, we're also going to look at government policy. Yes, population goes down as we advance economically, as we move through that demographic transition model, we start to actually see that growth rate starts to shrink. So that starts to decrease. It starts to stabilize, increases, then slowly decreases. Yeah. Again, if we're connecting back to that stage 5, eventually we're actually going negative. In fact, some countries in the world today, they're worried about not having enough people, while other places, depending on the stage, are worried about too many. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. These are up. These are just 2 government policies you want to be aware of. Pronatalists, again, you're promoting births. Antinatalists, we're trying to deter it. Variety of examples in the real world for these that you can look at. But generally, again, it depends on their population composition and what's happening there. Another government policy that I want to just quick highlight is immigration quotas. So remember, a quota is this limit it's set by. So generally speaking, depending on the sentiment of individuals, we may see quotas be used. Quota is going to limit immigration. So immigration is a way that you can actually have a positive growth, even if your rate of natural increase rate, CBR minus CDR, is negative. So depending on what's happening there, that can change some things. I see some people saying that. So people have given some very good examples of antinatalists. Yes, there is some. I have seen that one video, the Denmark one. All right. Another thing to highlight here is women's role in society. It is important to understand that as women get more opportunities in society and as they continue to be more involved, we'll see that population growth rate decrease. Increased education rates will decrease that child mortality rate, that infant mortality rate. As more people understand how to take care of kids, the amount of children that die go down. Eventually, that will then actually decrease our population growth rate because as people are living longer, then they start to have less kids. Also, too, if women are able to go to college and high school, college, get a master's degree, that pushes back that average time of when they're having children. And it allows women, too, to participate in different aspects of the workforce, which may then have women decide not to have children or have children. Whatever you decide, it's all up to you there. All right. Try to give some examples there. Hopefully that helped. All right. We're going to go on to the next thing. If you do need, the graphics. This is created by AI. So this is all ChatGPT. Yeah, this is ChatGPT. I tried to create, you'll see a couple. This next one actually for Ravenstein's laws of migration. This is all ChatGPT as well. That's kind of cool. Cool. Some people are asking about maquiladoras, and yes, that would be a maquiladora. We'll talk more about them later on as well. All right. So Ravenstein's laws of migration. These are themes that you want to be aware of. There's different things like most migrants are traveling short distances. Rural areas are more likely to migrate. Families are less likely to migrate across national boundaries or borders. Females are going to migrate more than men, but men travel longer distances. So there's a lot of different things of Ravenstein that you do want to have kind of an understanding of. But generally, instead of focusing on memorizing all of his laws, I would focus more on the concepts because they connect into all of our units. Economics is the number one reason why people migrate. Well, okay, that connects into a variety of different things. People want a better life for themselves. We can see men and women how that is actually changing. So maybe an FRQ asks you, how has explain the degree in which Ravenstein's laws of migration apply today. You could talk about a moderate degree of how women now, as more opportunities are offered to them, they're able to have more access to capital, money, which is allowing them to migrate on their own and cross some of these boundaries a little bit more easier, where before men mainly were because they were seen as the providers. So some of these things are changing a little bit, but really a lot of these things that Ravenstein noticed, we can see in the world today. So spend a little time with Ravenstein's laws of migration, but focus on those themes. One thing I do want to highlight that he mentions, and we see this come up in other units, is the gravity model. So the gravity model, you don't have to know the formula for anything on it. Um, the gravity model is going to look at the size of an area. So here you can see we have city 1, 2, we also have city 3, and then the distance. The larger the urban area, think of it like a large planet. It's got a big pull that it's going to pull people into. And that distance in between there, if there's a larger distance, generally distance decay, we're not going to interact as much. However, the larger the city, the more likely we are to interact with it because it's got that large pull. Even if it's a smaller city and it's closer, we might not interact with it as much because there's less opportunities and things for us to do there. So spend some time with the gravity model. It does come back on a couple of other things. Woo! Shout out to yes, Miss Cook's class, my ninth. I'm sorry, I butchered everything there, but shout out, thank you very much, very very kind of you. Okay, I'm gonna go off the chat now because I need to get through all this. I want to start the Kahoot. I apologize for it taking so long. Hopefully, again, this is helping you out. All right, pull factors, push and pull are pretty relatively simple, but you want to have an understanding. Pull is always going to be positive things. They're going to motivate people to come to an area or go to an area. Push factors are negative. They're going to push you out. Could again be for a variety of things. Remember, in this class, we have economic, we have political, we have social, we have environmental factors. All of these could be push and pull factors. And depending on who you are, they might be different. I live up in Minnesota. Some people love the winters here. Some people can't stand them. So depending on who you are, it'll differ. Speaking of migration and moving, one thing I want you to remember is the difference between emigration and immigration. Remember, when we're looking at this, emigration, an individual leaves, exit, E for exit, I for in. An individual is entering a country, so or a political territory. So when we're looking at this, definitely make sure you understand the difference between these two here. All right, migration, two couple things I'm going to highlight. These are very easily mixed up terms. Intervening obstacles and intervening opportunities. It's either negative or positive. Obstacles are going to be negative and opportunities are going to be positive. And both of these are things that are going to stop migration from occurring. So maybe someone's migrating to an area, maybe they're using step migration. And in that process, they come across like a boundary for a country, there's a wall. That would be an intervening obstacle. It stops them, they can't go on. Intervening opportunity would be they're moving through an area. Maybe they find the love of their life and they're like, oh my goodness, it's a Hallmark movie. I got to stay. They decide to stop migrating and stay there. That'd be a positive, positive thing. So it'd be an intervening opportunity. So again, something to point out. Two more concepts that I want to highlight too is inter-regional migration and intra-regional migration. And both of these are forms of internal migration. So migration happening inside a country. Inter-regional migration is from one region of a country to another, while intra-regional migration occurs between one region. Always, always, always read things carefully on this AP exam. The College Board doesn't want to trick you. However, they are going to know that, hey, students generally mix up like assimilation and acculturation. We'll talk about those tomorrow in Unit 3. Or they mix up inter-regional and intra-regional. So oftentimes, certain words will get kind of paired together. You will probably see inter-regional and intra-regional maybe together, or you'll see examples of them in an answer. So you're going to have to pick. They're trying to see, do you really understand these terms? This is also why you need to underline and to highlight as you go through these questions. Because in this case, inter or intra, that's the only difference between the terms. So if you're skim reading, very easy to miss that. And I don't want you to miss these easy points. So make sure we are reading carefully, geographers. You can do this. All right. Up next, we have forced migration, bunch of different types of forced migration, human trafficking, forced child labor, child soldier, slavery. All of these are in the CED. One of the things I want to highlight, though, to make sure you don't mix up on, is a refugee and an asylum seeker. Now, these are examples of forced migration. Remember, a refugee has crossed that international boundary. They have crossed it. So they've gone into a new country there, and they're trying to escape persecution, war, some natural disaster. And an asylum seeker, generally, they are trying to get asylum in another country. So as an individual trying to get asylum, they are trying to be accepted into another country for protection. And refugees are people who are fleeing for their lives. It could be natural disaster, war, or persecution. The other term you might see, and you don't want to get this mixed up, this is the big long definition from the United Nations if you're interested in it. But the other one is an internally displaced person, or IDP. Again, forced migration is happening here. The difference between an IDP and a refugee, the only difference is that an IDP did not cross that international boundary. They are still within the same country. So, for example, if we have someone in Syria, there's the Syrian civil war that's been ongoing. If they have fled their home, but they're still in the borders of Syria, they'd be an IDP. Or though, if they have crossed the Syrian border and they have fled, then they would be a refugee. If they have exited, they've emigrated out of Syria, then they would be a refugee. So definitely focus on these terms. And again, context matters. So make sure you read the full situation. All right. Woo. My gosh, so much talking. Let me know too. It's easier probably if you let me know in the comments of this video later on. Is this helpful? Is it not? Definitely going to make this probably a little shorter in the next one, but we'll see. All right, voluntary migration. You want to have an understanding here. Transnational is one that you might see. This is listed in that CED. So here we have this migrant emigrating from their home country. Oftentimes they're going to go to a similar spot. And they're going to remain connected. I'm going to go through these really quick. So, transhumans, this is one that's kind of different, connects to that livestock, this seasonal migration. So, you can see right here, we're looking at the summertime, the winter. Our directions are changing based on the seasons. So, this is cyclical, it's going and rotating in a variety of different ways there based on the seasons and animals. Chain migration, this is going to be part of family reunification. Whole goal here, you have an individual that migrates to a country and then they eventually become a naturalized citizen. Then they would sponsor someone else to come. And this takes a longer process. This one oftentimes is oversimplified a lot, and I'm oversimplifying right now. You just have to understand the process of it. You don't need to know all the different legal things. But this is a longer process for individuals. It's not like as soon as you get here, immediately you can switch. All right, step migration is our next one. Migration happens in stages. So here, migrants make stops on their way to their final destination. This is also one of the more common forms of migration that Ravenstein noticed. It's because you go from like a small town, move to a city, you save up some more money, eventually you can afford the next stage in that. So you're going in stages to that final destination. Guest workers, again, temporary legal status, you want to remember. Oftentimes, a lot of countries will use guest workers to help support their labor force. You're here for a certain amount of time, then you would go home. Now, one thing that you might see with guest workers is readmittance. That could come up on the AP exam. Readmittance is when you're making money and then you send it back home to your family. Next one is rural to urban migration. This comes up a bunch. We're going from rural areas to urban areas here. So again, main reason why is economics. We're moving there because of money and the opportunities. All right. If you need any more practice with the migration, check out the packet. Again, I got a whole video of 5 things to remember, quiz, and then there's a 30-minute video of me taking the quiz and breaking it down and explaining everything. So that'll help you out. Very last thing, and we're done. We're done with all of it. This went a lot longer than I thought. We're about to start the Kahoot. The last thing is effects of migration, whether it be political, economic, social, environmental, technically to a carrying capacity. So have an idea of some of those things. For example, are we going to have enough jobs? Are we going to have enough schools, food? Is there going to be a cultural resistance that forms against immigration? Are we going to have some resentment? Are we going to have different communities? How is that going to change the culture, the food, different aspects there? So we're not going to go into all that because we are going to switch. Someone said ads on a live stream are crazy. I didn't realize that there's ads. I've just been talking this whole time, so I'm not sure. That's a YouTube thing, I think. If it isn't a YouTube, I don't know how to switch that. But all right, we're gonna switch to the Kahoot. Hopefully, this was helpful. Oops, sorry. Again, if you do need help with anything, feel free to let me know. Let's switch this up. Now I will be able to interact with the chat a lot more because I'll actually be able to look at things. So getting the Kahoot up right now.